Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another Social Blueprint interview where we highlight people in the community who you may or may not know, but everybody has a story. And today, friends, I am especially excited to be joined by Leah Akoka because Leah has an incredible journey, but more than that, we're going to take away today true life skills that we can take with us now and use and implement. And Leah, if nothing else, you have an audience of one here, but I know you have a lot more than that. And with that introduction, welcome.
Thank you.
Leah, I normally don't like to start in chronological order, but I just want to back up for a second to set the stage and really establish a little bit about your credibility. You did not come to life with a silver spoon in your pocket, did you?
Definitely not, no.
Maybe just tell us a little bit about how you got to Australia and your upbringing.
So my family migrated to Australia in 1979. We came from Azerbaijan, which is part of the old Soviet Union.
Right.
So we migrated, we didn't migrate, we actually came in as refugees.
Okay.
So at that stage in the late 70s, the USSR opened the gates
Right.
for Jewish immigration. It was specifically for Jewish immigration, just like many other parts of the world. Jews weren't that popular there,
Right.
as we all know. So we migrated we were left as refugees. We went to Italy, and then in Italy, you applied to go to different countries, and there was a lot of us came to Australia at that stage. I was 8 when I got to Australia.
Right. And also setting the stage and fast forwarding a little bit here, and we're going to jump around a little bit about, you really come from the school of, I would call it, life experiences, don't you? Maybe tell us about that late teenage period into your early career, and especially at the Yellow Pages.
Oh, okay, no problem. So my late teens, I was very strong-willed.
Yes.
My typical Jewish family, education was very important. So my mother specifically wanted me to get a good education. So very, very much about doing well. So she pushed me, and I got into McRobertson Girls High School.
Right.
So I went there, but it wasn't for me. I didn't like it.
Yes.
And because I was very, very much focused on earning my own money, because my parents couldn't afford to give to me. I had a lot of jobs. So I had 3 jobs by the age of 16. So I could afford to buy whatever I wanted. So I took myself out of the school, bought myself books, bought myself a new uniform, and one day appeared in the morning to go to school in a different uniform. My mother looked at me and goes, "What is this?" I said to her, "This is my new uniform. I'm not going to McRobertson anymore. I'm going to McKinnon High."
Wow.
She was not happy with me. But I was very strong-willed, and she'll tell you today that I never listened to her. Never, ever did I listen to her. So, so I put myself into McKinnon High, and it was very social.
Right.
I had a great time, and I was with like-minded fellow students that were very entrepreneurial in thinking. And that's what I had, I think. I think I had that entrepreneurial thinking from the beginning. I didn't see how the education was going to get me where I wanted to go.
Right.
That was my mentality. Didn't agree with my mum, because my mum had this thing first of, you need to be a doctor. That wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And then what happened was, I did get into uni,
Right.
into an information systems degree. But what happened was I had a very big car accident. So, very big car accident. I was in coma for a while. I think I was clinically dead when they cut me out of the car. So it was actually a situation where I had no choice but defer uni.
Right.
And I think that was good because, not the accident was good, but how it kind of shaped my pathway. And then I had to start working because I wasn't going to sit around and do nothing. So I started to work, and I did well. And that was the Yellow Pages days. And Yellow Pages was my first real job, as in corporate job. And
right.
I was very, very lucky to get an opportunity. Like, you talk about sales. I was naturally good at sales, but lots of people are naturally good at sales. But what a lot of people don't get an opportunity to do is learn how to take their talent and turn it into a recipe.
Right.
Because until you do that, it's very difficult to teach other people how to.
Right. And that's one of the things, and again, we're jumping around here a little bit, but sales. The skill of sales, I know many people have it as a dirty word, but it's not, because everybody's persuading somebody to do something.
Yeah.
If you're a parent, that's called your kids.
Mm-hmm.
So Can you just give us a little bit of maybe a framework of when you see sales and what made you and makes you so good at it?
Okay, so I'm just going to give you some I suppose foundational kind of mindset
Yes.
that I had and have.
Yes.
So when I first started at Yellow Pages, I was 20. It was before my 21st birthday. I was 20 years old, and they had a ranking, and I started in telephone sales, which is selling on the phone. They had a ranking from the top to the bottom, and the top 10% would go on an incentive trip overseas. So I was quite excited about that. I thought, okay, it's great. And my first day after I did training, I walked into my manager's office, and his name was Glenn Parkhill. He lives in Queensland now. And I asked him I brought the ranking to him, and I said, how am I going to get to number one?
Right.
And he laughed at me, and he said, look, just go back to your desk, okay? Just go back to this. You can't do it anyway. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, because our year is August to August. I had started in October, so I missed 2 months.
Okay,
so I was behind the 8 ball. So I thought, well, that's not good enough. There's no such thing as can't. Took the ranking and started walking around the office looking for the number one. And the number one, her name is Francesca Sini, and we're very, very close friends today. I found her on the balcony having a coffee and smoking a cigarette, because in those days that's what we all did. And I introduced myself. She looked at me like, who are you? I introduced myself and asked her how did she do this? How did she get there? What I need to do? I just started.
Right.
Anyway, so what she gave me was, I think at that stage, she told me, so we worked on a point system. So she basically said to me, this is what you need to do every day. If you do this every day, you'll be fine.
Right.
But what I didn't realize at the time is that she was a bit laughing at me a little bit, and she gave me a target that was a lot higher than it should have been.
Right.
But I didn't know that. This is part of the mindset.
Right.
All right.
Absolutely.
So went back to my desk, said, okay, this is what I have to do every day. Divided my workload, new business, existing business, kind of decided what I was going to target, and basically picked up the phone and started selling.
Right.
I did not leave any day until I made that minimum. And that minimum was, from memory, 5,000 points. It worked in a point system, points a day. So I had days where I had 10, 20, was lucky days, but I start the next day at 0 again. And what had happened is within 2 months, I was number one.
Wow.
Within 2 months, I was number one. Francesca was actually promoted onto the road, so I never actually technically beat her. But I did become number one, and that year I finished number one nationally.
Wow. So that's what I'm hearing is a couple of things. Firstly, just the sheer willpower. If not even if you didn't have skills per se, you had sheer willpower.
Well, see, so this is where I don't necessarily think it's willpower, because I have terrible willpower. If I had great willpower, I would have lost weight a long time ago.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say it's willpower. What it is I think it's people overcomplicate things.
Right.
Okay. So they look at people that are successful, they look at people that, and they go, they must have something.
Right.
Okay. There must be some secret, or it must be complicated. It can't be this simple. But it actually is. It actually is this simple. And the simplicity is you need to commit to doing what you need to do and just do it. We procrastinate, we think about it, we overcomplicate it, we put in steps in the place where we don't need to. It's like the simpler you make it for yourself, the easier it is.
Get out of your own way.
Get out of your way, just do it.
Right.
So, and that was kind of my mentality. It was just about, I remember there was a sales rep who worked really hard. She worked very late hours, and the manager asked me to sit down with her and said, listen, something's wrong, because she's working all the hours, she's working so hard, but the sales aren't there.
There's no lack of effort.
No lack of effort, right? It didn't take long for me to sit down with her and see what she was doing. Her desk was spotless. There was piles everywhere. Everything was wonderful, but the phone, the old days, phones, that's how they all worked. So the phone wasn't in her ear. So I told her, if that's not there, you're not making any money.
Right.
So all this is very pretty, but this is, and it's all about this whole thing of procrastination. We do that in anything we do.
Yeah.
Sales is also, it's hard. Nobody wants to talk to someone they don't know. Nobody wants the rejection. Nobody wants, so we overcomplicate it. So we put things in our way to kind of delay that process. So it's just about jumping in and doing it, and that's what I did.
And drilling on that point where you said like nobody wants to do it because everyone's afraid of rejection at some level or not, is that something where you, in a way, was it a blessing at the Yellow Pages where you're just so much repetitions that you become immune to it, or is it every time you just have to overcome it? That fear of rejection.
So the fear of rejection I overcame way before that. Okay. So I think as an immigrant, and all of my friends will tell you they're very similar. You come to a country where you don't speak any English,
right.
So you're not comfortable. The first time I felt anti-Semitism was actually in Australia, not back in Azerbaijan.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of things. I wouldn't say there was a lot of anti-Semitism at that time, but everything, a combination of that, a combination of not knowing the language, a combination of learning to do whatever you need to do
right.
to make that dollar.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think it's that whole.
It's the classic immigrant mentality,
yeah,
to be honest with you.
Exactly.
We know so many people here, and before your time, but so many of the post-Holocaust survivors had very similar types of mentalities, if you will. They just would not be stopped.
Well, this is the grit we talk about.
Pardon?
The grit.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because you hear a lot of people talking about grit. You know, that the young people today don't have the grit. What is the grit? And that is the grit. All this is the grit. The grit comes from having to climb, having to scratch, having to do whatever it needs to be done to well, look, thank God I didn't have to put food on the table at that stage. My parents did that.
Right.
And my father went to work in a factory. My mother went to clean houses. They did what they had to do to put food on the table. For me, it was I wanted the extra and the nice things.
Right.
You know, so it's that process, and I think first it's a process where you need to believe you can.
Okay.
So if you believe you can, which is the hardest thing, because I think what a lot of people don't believe really is that they can, and that's why they make the excuses for themselves.
Absolutely.
And the reason I can't is because I don't have the rich father. The reason I can't is because I don't have the education, or I'm not smart enough. The reason I can't because I don't have, people I know that will help me. Whatever. It's all of those excuses we give ourselves, but it's an internal belief that we're not convinced inside that we can.
And Leah, did you always have that inner belief in yourself, or was it something that it came about maybe after a certain achievement?
So
tough question.
No. This is actually an easy question because I have a very clear aha moment when this happened, where a lot of people don't, and I think that's where one of the reasons I'm very lucky. So I was 8. We just came to Australia. Came to Australia, and my brother was 5, and every Saturday we would go to the supermarket, Chapel Street, Coles, and this specific Saturday, we'd catch the bus to go to the supermarket because my mum didn't have a car. My father was working, and the bus would take us to the supermarket. We'd do the shopping. My mum would fill out the form so the groceries would get delivered. And once in a blue moon, she would take us to this little cafe. We'd be very excited to go to this cafe. You get some chips, and it was nothing. But for us, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because we never ate out, and this was an exception, and we were very excited about it. This particular Saturday, we're outside the supermarket, and we could go left to the bus stop, or we could go across the road to go to the cafe.
Right. And
this particular Saturday, my brother and I are standing there waiting, what is she going to do? And she decided to go across the road. So we're all excited, we're about to cross the road. And as we cross the road, there's this beautiful car that pulls up.
Right.
Beautiful car that pulls up, and this gorgeous woman walks out of the car, looking stunning, dressed very well.
Right.
Look, I don't remember what the model of the car was, but for me it was flashy.
Right.
And I'm looking at her in awe. And my mother looked at me and she said, why are you looking at her like that? And I said, well, because look at her. She's beautiful. She's wealthy, everything else. And she said to me, the words she said to me was, there's nothing she has that you don't have. Absolutely nothing. That's why we came to this country. If you want to be this woman, you can be. And I remember...
That's amazing, yeah.
And I remember thinking about it and it actually occurring to me that if I can be her, I need to hurry up and do it. It was like this realization, but before that I belonged in a box. It was the poor box. We're the poor people. The first words my mother learned in English, one of the first ones, was we can't afford it. So we heard a lot of we can't afford it. and we couldn't afford it. So that's the reality. So I walked into that cafe and I was no longer interested in the chips or the drink or anything else. All I was thinking of, how am I going to not say to myself or my family that I can't afford it ever again? And that was at 8. I promised myself that was going to happen. Now, obviously, I couldn't go to work at 8.
Right.
By 13, I had my first job. By 16, I had 3 jobs. And I was working every opportunity I had, and I was buying whatever I wanted.
Right.
So my aspiration wasn't to be extra wealthy or to have a plane or anything like that. It was just to be able to walk into a shop and buy whatever I want without having to think twice.
Wow.
And I think I did that pretty much at 16.
That's amazing. Like, there's so many ways I can go here right now. We're going to try to get to all of it. But one of the things I want to talk about right now is fast forward your mentality towards the current generation. We know we have a lot of viewers in that, call it early 20s, early 30s category, if you will. A lot of them are very good students. They look amazing on paper, but they may not have that word that you used before, grit. Any words of advice to them or words of wisdom?
Yes. Focus. What do you focus on? So for me, it's all great to have the education, to have the theory.
Right.
I think the reality is when you go into the workforce or when you start climbing any ladder, doesn't matter if it's before education, after, it could be all the way through, I think it's what are you focusing on? If you're focusing on the wrong thing, then you're not going to get where you want to go. So you need to, one, understand that whatever you do, you need to put your all into it.
Right.
Okay? So you need to be amazing at everything you do. Because as you are amazing in whatever you do, you will get an opportunity to do the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing. And then before you know it, life has taken you where you need to go.
Yeah.
Because you've deserved it.
Or you've earned it, I suppose.
Well, that's why you've deserved it, because you've earned it. So it's the focus. What are you focusing on? As I think we spoke earlier, I said to you that the focus with young people today is on what they're doing rather than what they're achieving. And I use an example of my husband and I renovated a property that we had a few years back. And while we were renovating this property to sell, while we were renovating this property, I was a bookkeeper sometimes I was a designer, sometimes I was a buyer, sometimes I was a tiler. I mean, it depends. And sometimes I was a cleaner.
Right.
So if I look at what I did and what I do, if I focused on the doing, then I would never have gotten to where I went, because no one enjoys cleaning.
Right.
I hate bookkeeping.
Yeah.
But I had to do those things.
Right.
But it was never even a thought in my head that I didn't like doing that or didn't like doing that.
Right.
The thought in my head and my focus was the end result of we need to sell this and make a profit.
Right.
We ended up selling the property and it got record price for the area, for the property at the time. And it was because we're focused on that goal.
Amazing. Yeah.
And that's the advice I would give the young people today. That don't worry about what you're doing, because you do whatever you have to do to get to the next step. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's where you're going. Right. And forget about what you're earning today, because what you're earning today doesn't matter. There's many, many jobs you can get there that may pay you a little bit more today, but are they going to give you a future? Are they going to give you potential income? Right.
Amazing. And speaking of income and success, you also worked at Dodo, correct?
Yes, more or less. Okay, so in, what was it, 2001, 2002, it was a while ago, I bumped into a friend of mine, Larry, who just started Dodo.
Yeah, just for the audience that don't know, who is Larry?
Oh, who's Larry? Sorry, Larry Kesselman.
Yes, exactly.
Who is the founder of Dodo Internet, and currently the chairman of NBL, and he's got lots of different businesses. So I bumped into him. I was on St Kilda Road. I was working for an IT service provider, and anyway. Long story short, because it's a long story. Yeah. He offered me an opportunity. I couldn't refuse.
Right.
I started my business at that time in partnership with Dodo.
Okay.
So Dodo was there. So I did the people side of Dodo. So I hired, managed, and trained all of the people.
Right.
So 1 person, 2 people, 5 people, 500 people. It grew. until we got to, actually probably 400, 500 people at that stage, before the first knock on the door came from Telstra with an offer to buy the business. And we realised during the due diligence process that we weren't structured for a sale. So we went through a restructure, and Dodo went on its own entity, and Wall Street had to find its own kind of identity. And that was when I started knocking on doors and trying to sell services that I didn't know what to call. So it was like, what do you do, people? What does that mean? Well, just people.
Right.
So, yeah.
But clearly the proof is in the pudding for your business about people and managing people and maybe getting the best out of people. Are there any high-level, I guess, suggestions, if you will? What makes it? Because people, as everybody know, make businesses run. It's not Telstra, it's not Dodo, it's not Commonwealth Bank of Australia. There are people.
Yeah. So about seven years ago, in the journey to try and make my business scalable, I thought, okay, I have to take what's up here and put it down. So I have to make my own recipes. So that's what I'm good at.
Right.
I'm good at making recipes, sales recipes. So they're recipes.
Right.
So I thought, I need to make that recipe, and that process then became a methodology or framework that I wrote, which is based on a combination of NLP and behavioral economics, and that's called people economics. And so I wrote that about 7 years ago, and that's that recipe for people success.
Right.
And basically the foundations of this recipe say that the productivity of your people can be measured, can be improved. There's been studies done for years. There was one done in 2019 over America and Europe. I think they took about 1,000 businesses to look at the average productivity of your staff.
Right.
And 2019, it came up with the average being 65%. And then they looked at what are the higher performing businesses doing, and that was at 85%.
Right.
So there was a 25% difference then. They did that same study again in 2023.
4 years later. Yeah.
4 years later, and the lower end dropped.
Dropped?
Yeah, it dropped.
It went to COVID? Or?
Well, this is interesting. It dropped. It went to 60%. The higher end stayed at 85%. It went to 60%. I actually think that, because we didn't do anything in between. Right. And it was COVID in between. So I actually think it went up and then dropped even lower. Okay. So I actually think that that's what it was. Yeah. So a lot of what I do is based on NLP. NLP is obviously, for those who don't know what it is, it stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, but it is about understanding how people think, understanding how people understand information. And if you understand how they understand information, then you know how to better communicate with them. Right. So a lot of what I've got in there has a lot of a basis of NLP plus behavioral economics, which actually, if anybody wants to research that, is fascinating. One of our people actually invented it.
Wow. Okay.
Danny Kahneman invented it. He won a Nobel Prize for it.
That's right.
In the 70s, I think it was, or he invented in the 70s. I'm not sure when he won the Nobel Prize for it, but amazing man. If you ever listen to him or read his books, he's incredible. Yes. So that recipe basically says that the difference between your, the study actually said the difference between your lower end performing businesses to your higher end was one thing, ultimately. And what do you think it is? I'll ask you, what do you think it is?
I would say that it's people motivation. That's from a very high level.
Yes, it is. It's morale. That's what it is.
And it's not necessarily only driven by just paying them more money, is it?
It's never driven by paying them more money. That never gives you morale.
Right.
Money never does it. And when people leave a business, they actually tell you, when you do an exit interview, they'll tell you, this is bad, that's bad, that's bad, and I don't get paid enough. Right. It never starts with I don't get paid enough. It's this, and this, and I don't get paid enough. Yeah. So that's the third thing they go to. It's usually the third reason. Interesting. I never thought about it like that, but that is absolutely true. Now, NLP, we've referred to it here already. It's a highly regarded, I don't know if you call it system of thinking, of state management, if you will. I'm curious about, I want to get into the weeds on it. One of the things is, I think that we all understand about the power of being in a certain state of mind. The question is, how do we get into that state of mind, especially when we need it the most? Okay. I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah, I mean, I can do a masterclass here in 2 minutes, but no, it's difficult. there is the connection between the body and the mind.
Right.
So it's the physical and the mental.
Yep.
So there's so what happens is we are who we are based on programming. Okay, so programming starts from day one. We're babies.
Right.
We're babies. We're labeled. Our parents label us. We're the fat one, the smart one, the slow one, the fast one. You know, we get labeled. So you start talking early. This is going to be a genius. This child's now going to be. You start walking early. This is the next Olympian. This is how we think. This is what happens, and those labels sometimes stick.
Right.
Okay, and then. So what does it come? What comes first, the label or the or the mannerisms, or the things? So there's a combination of things. So this programming happens from a combination of that,
right?
Cultural, of course, as we know, there is something that connects us all as Jews. So there is a cultural chemistry there that comes from somewhere. I don't know. I'd like to investigate that one day and actually really find out if it's in our genes or not, because there definitely is. And then you think about, your friendship circle, your finance, were you born to a poor family, rich family? All of these things matter. Okay, so all of those things make us who we are. Right. And then, and obviously things we've dealt with, and what baggage we've had, and the rest of it. So the point is, though, if we are programmed, then we can be reprogrammed. That's part of that. The belief system here with NLP to say that whatever can be programmed can be reprogrammed. How do you reprogram it? And that is all about all the different ways. And there's many, many different ways. Now, the mental and the physical is like when you're an introvert, when you're shy, usually you do this. Usually your demeanor is quite, inverted, your tone, the way you stand, the way you look down, you don't necessarily make eye contact. Right. So there's a whole thing there. So the quickest and easiest way to move that and to change that is to start with the physical. Right. So if you start with not the mental, you start with the physical. So because you can change that yourself consciously and go, okay, now I'm going to stand like this, I'm going to talk like that, and you practice in front of a mirror, practice with people you might not know. Right. In a shop, we'll go into a shop and then practice with the attendant.
There are 1,000 opportunities a day.
Exactly. And then when you start changing the physical, it then affects the mental. Now, it takes time. I'm not saying you're doing it over one time. Yeah. I think there's a 30-day, 29-day rule. You do something every day for 29 days. The 30th day, it just becomes natural. Yeah. So I would suggest that would be the biggest thing you could do straight away, easiest thing. But there are many things, and unfortunately, we don't have the time to do an NLP masterclass.
Right. But NLP certainly works in terms of sales, takes a certain frame of mind, so there's a natural overlap, and then I suppose there's also a natural overlap with productivity in the workforce then.
Yes, there's an overlap with everything, but NLP basically teaches you the why. If you understand the why, then it's much easier to understand what you have to do to affect that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's the why. Why do people think like that? Why do they react like that? Why? And if you understand the why, you understand the other person, then it's much easier to then communicate. I'm not a great believer in the things that are more kind of sit like this or sit like that and walk like that and walk like that. That is part of some of the techniques of NLP. I think that doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you need to be yourself, not to mimic the person you're with. You need to understand the person you're with. Right. You need to understand the person you're trying to communicate to and understand which way they would rather get that information. Yes, you do. I suppose if you're talking to a person that's quite low toned, if you're going to be very loud, you're going to obviously disconnect with them. So that's the connection component.
So you try to kind of meet them where they're at a little bit.
And the biggest part of the success with communication, because that's what that is listening. Right. Listening not just to what the words say, it's the meanings behind the words. Right. Which means asking questions.
And is that also, would you say, one of your secret sauces, if you will? But I don't necessarily say it's a secret sauce. It sounds like it's practiced and learned from you.
Oh, definitely is practiced and learned. Like anything, I think once you do it consciously often enough, it becomes habit. It becomes natural. It becomes something you do without thinking. And over time, that's what happens. I was lucky enough to do sales management, to also do some sales training, and I learned how to use all those tools in those different environments, in those different roles. So and I went through the theory and the practical simultaneously, which I think is the biggest advantage, because what people do, they look at training the wrong way.
Right.
Our education system is wrong, the way we do it. The learning cycle, I think it was 70-20-10. 10% theory,
Right.
20% watching
Right.
and seeing how it's done, and 70% doing. What we do is we put people into university, it's so much theory and very little of the rest of it.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
That's what I'm saying. So I was lucky enough to actually practice what I'm learning simultaneously, and that's, I think, what embeds the lesson.
Right. And certainly you're having the results. You have a huge roster of clients. Obviously, they're paying you money not because they just love you. They think that they get results out of it. So certainly the proof is in the pudding there. Leah, I also just want to turn, you mentioned Larry Kassim, who also has an amazing story. Any learnings that we could take from him that made him, I know we said earlier that not everybody's just special per se, but clearly he's done something right.
Oh, he's done lots of things right.
That's how much.
Larry, I think Larry's best attribute or skill, I would say, he's got lots of great attributes, but he's I think one of the biggest kind of formulas for his success is he's really, really good at putting the right people in the right places. So
again, people,
yeah. So it's looking at who's best doing that and who's best doing that and who's best doing that. I think he knows and he identifies that he can't do everything,
right,
and he doesn't want to do everything. So I think that is it's rare, because you'll have a lot of successful people and founders who are very controlling and they want to control everything and do everything, and that's all great, but it only gives you that much. To go to that next level, you need to be able to use the right people and be on the same page and trust and be aligned, and that's really difficult, especially as you grow.
Well, yeah, as you grow, and my wife and I, we always talk about this, and I'm curious if you've seen this too. It's a different skill set to get something from 0 to 1 to get something from 1 to 50. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that in your career as well?
Definitely. So I work most of the time with growing businesses. That's why they come to me.
Right.
Because they're growing and they need scale.
Right.
And what takes you here, it doesn't take you there. I think there's a famous book about that. Okay. The business needs to be repotted very often. I call it repotting. And structure needs to be really looked at, who you've got doing what. What happens is most businesses make the mistake as they grow of the people that were good at this, they just keep promoting them because it makes sense. And that is what costs the business.
Right. And in a way that they feel probably to some degree that they've earned the right to promote them.
Yeah. So there are ways of promoting them, not necessarily to these kind of positions. So there's ways of bringing people up without giving them management positions. And what happens is, as we all know, great salespeople don't necessarily make good sales managers.
Right.
Actually, they usually don't. So and if you're really good at that skill, a great plumber doesn't make a good business leader, or So once you start growing, you need to look at, okay, what are the skills I need now, because they're different, and what skills do I have? So I need to relook at where I am. Am I the person that's controlling the business day to day, or am I best off stepping aside and being the one who's adding the value through the product, through the innovation, through the, and that may be your strength, because usually founders have that strength, but they need someone who's operationally going to run their business day to day. So it's structure needs to be repotted all the time. Usually I would, again, depending on the type of business, but the cracks start happening at about 15 employees. That's where the cracks start happening. And then, again, repotting probably happens then at about 50 employees. And again, as I said, it depends on the business. And then so, it constantly needs to happen.
Yeah, and I could also imagine that if you have a business that is pretty successful, it's off the ground for a few years, you have 15 employees, it's very hard to change because you've had some success. And so getting at it, and it feels really risky at that point, doesn't it?
It does. It's very hard to change because you kind of think, I've got it here, so I'm really good, I've done this, so, why would I look at a different formula. Because, like I said, what got you here is not going to get you there. It's just as simple as that. There's reasons why family businesses, famous family businesses have had to get on board, have had to make changes.
Right.
And some have done it really well. And the ones that have done it really well are ones that have made sure that their children work from the ground up, have made sure that they've made some things, and you can see the patterns of success and the patterns of failure. And I don't want to name any specific businesses because I don't think it's right, but there are businesses that have so much potential that I know, Jewish families that have not repotted and the children have just ruined the businesses. I'm sure we all know some of these.
Absolutely. We're going to turn the table here a little bit here. You mentioned Jewish families, Jewish businesses. You're very much involved in the Jewish community here in Melbourne. What does it mean to you? I'm just curious, and especially, I'm curious also as an immigrant where this country has given you a lot, and yet we see a lot of young people somewhat throwing it away and encouraging it. I'm just curious your thoughts about it.
I really think that, I've got 3 children, and my oldest is 27. And when she was young, she was a socialist. She really was.
Right.
She was like, she didn't want to fly business class because she didn't earn it.
Right.
She was like, my son's very different. He doesn't care. But but
he likes the leg room.
Yeah, exactly. But there is, I think there is, when you're younger, there is this whole social kind of I don't know, justice that you're going through. You think that what's fair, what's right. People shouldn't be hungry and all the rest of it. We should be feeding everybody. We should be doing the right thing and the rest of it. And I definitely think that we definitely need to be thinking about the repercussions for everything we do. Definitely. I think though what happens is that today as young people, they've never actually had that hardship.
Right.
So they're talking from a place where they don't actually know, and you can see that with the camps,
the
encampments at the universities, whatever they're called. What are they called? They're called encampments, whatever they're called. You can see them.
But those tents are $5,000 a piece.
Well, did you hear they were given the tents? They didn't have to buy the tents. I'd be interested to see who gave them the tents. But anyway, but it's just, you talk to these kids and they've got no clue. They just don't know. They don't understand. They don't know why they're there. They don't really know anything. And someone's taken advantage of that. And obviously, then there's a few there that obviously have an ulterior kind of a purpose. But it's generally, you think about it, and it was actually when this first thing started. It was in the States. It was in I think it was in New York.
Columbia University.
It was, but there was a picture that was on TikTok or wherever it went viral, where there was this kid who had a mask on. It was a black kid actually, and he had a placard, whatever it said, I don't remember. And you see the mother running up to him and hitting him and grabbing the mask. And I thought that was so funny because it's that's the image, this is the mother of this child. So she obviously is appalled at the fact that her kid is doing this, because, and then you think, what did we do wrong as parents? What are we teaching our children? Are we teaching our children? Is someone else now teaching our children and taking it? And that is the world today. We don't actually know what our children are learning anymore because it's different. It's totally changed. And that's a bit scary. And I think young people, a friend of mine's son was going through this finding himself process, and he just recently went to Israel. And I think it was the best thing he did, and it was really good for him, and it was good for us also, I think, for me and his mother, to actually feel that, okay, that you understand now. Because I think hearing all of this information without really knowing and understanding and living, I think is, you can twist anything into anything.
Because what's incredible to me, and again, you moved here when you were 8 years old, so I don't know exactly how much you really remember, but you came from a communist country where it was very controlling, and it personally frustrates the heck out of me when kids are wanting this and wanting to give it up. I don't think they quite understand what they're getting themselves into. Do you have a similar type of view?
They don't understand. It's not even quite understand. They have no clue.
Right.
And not that I do, because I was 8, so
Right.
I don't think I
Yeah,
have
that's what I
either.
said.
Yeah, my parents do. My parents do. My father was in a situation where to earn money, he bought things from one place and sold them in another place. So, and that was illegal there. You couldn't do that. You couldn't run your own business, because that's running your own business.
Wow.
So one of the reasons we left was because if we didn't, we'd probably end up in jail, which a lot of people did. So until you live in that kind of society, in that situation, you don't know. Until you live in a place where, and this is something I don't actually know either. My parents would know much more, and then people from Ukraine and Belarus, from other places of Russia, would know much more than, because Azerbaijan wasn't so bad in terms of it was a Muslim country, so there wasn't, the anti-Semitism wasn't anywhere near as bad as it was in the Ukraine and Belarus. The stories I hear are just so sad. Like, you literally, they would go to school and people would start, they would be called names, they would be bashed on a daily basis just because they were Jewish. So that's so, I mean, how like, can we understand that? Like, to think about that, the concept of that, is horrible. And obviously we're seeing that today coming up, and it's very scary. And although it is bringing us together, I think, as a community, it's still, I think, it's just horrible to be in a place like that.
There's so much more to discuss here. But any closing comments before we call it a day?
Oh, listen, who am I talking to? These are young people I'm talking to?
Potentially, yes.
Potentially, okay. Well, the only thing that I would say to young people is that you're so lucky. Don't waste your youth, okay? You are so lucky. You have got you're living in a world where the opportunities are definitely there. Focus. Don't focus on the crap, Just don't focus on what you can't do. Don't focus on what you can't control. Focus on what you can and just do it. That's my closing.
Leah, thank you so much. We're definitely going to check in again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.